Hey everybody, Greg and Keith here, and this week on Little Wars TV, we're taking a break from your regularly scheduled programming. We're at the halfway point of the season. We've done 5 of our 10 episodes, and we thought this would be a good time to pause for a week and answer some questions. So we've gotten a number of good questions over the last couple of months, so...
let the masses speak.
Let the masses speak. And let's start with an email that we got from John. And John asks, how do you decide what to review?
Just what we play. What we use in the club, mostly.
I mean, all the rules that you've seen so far and the ones that you're going to see coming up in the back half of the season are games that we play frequently here in the club.
Some for years we've played.
Some for many years.
So they're kind of like default in some cases.
Yeah, a lot of them are our favorites. Force on Force and GQ3 are both great examples. Those are sort of long-time favorites here in the club. But we play lots of rules. I mean, tons of World War II. My gosh, we probably play half a dozen or more different World War II rules in this club.
Well, I know with that we played, we did Chain of Command because it's popular. So
exactly.
We wanted to kind of put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll be seeing a lot more because we play a lot of rules. So sticking on the subject of rules, another email. This one's from Ken, and he says, what is a deal breaker in a game system? One thing impossible to overlook that ruins the experience and renders the game unworkable.
Ooh.
So, fellow rules author.
Oh, jeez.
What's a deal breaker? Do you have any deal breakers?
Yeah, I do. Card activation.
Card activation.
Unless it's paired with some other mechanism to kind of downplay the complete randomness of that. I've never enjoyed a card activation.
So what about like, I generally don't like card activation either. I'm on the record as a hater of that. But not in all cases. I mean, I think if you've ever played Fire as She Bears, Age of Sail, that's card activation.
That's true.
There's also a little bit of card activation going on in Peter Pig's Hammer and Iron, the ACW
but the
system.
chaos of that is so much fun. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, exactly.
I just want to see boilers explode.
Well, that's why I'm asking. Is card activation bad in all cases?
Yeah, that's true.
I generally don't like it.
I think now that you mentioned it, in a couple cases I'm willing to overlook it, but the fun factor has to be high enough.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, that makes sense. What about you?
I can't really think of any deal breakers mechanically. I guess if I had a deal breaker, it would be games that I find to be overly tedious or cumbersome. Yeah. There's certainly been a trend, I know, in the last 10 years, really, of wargame design of streamlining. That's what they call it. Rules are getting shorter. They're getting simpler. You don't see as many guys doing stuff like Advanced Squad Leader or Napoleonic Empire. I don't know if you ever played Empire, but
charts within charts.
Charts within charts.
Flow charts to look up charts.
Right. I need a chart to find a chart, and it's like, you know what? I don't have time for that, and I don't think most people do these days.
Staff work, the game.
You know, if you've watched any of our rule reviews, that's why playability is 30% of the whole score.
Right. It's a big one.
That's a big one. It's got to be playable. So.
That's true. Yeah, that's card-driven is it for me, and just really cumbersome for you.
That would be my deal breaker. A great question here from Skeptical Crypto. May I suggest more hip flasks? I believe he was talking about the flask you were guzzling at our Antietam tour.
Yeah, with the apple cider.
Yes, right, apple juice.
Apple juice, that's it.
It was apple juice.
Yeah. Well, I'd be willing to get a hip flask for the camera.
Yeah, I see no problem with that whatsoever. And then we've got a question here from Stefan on YouTube, and he says, I like your video style in general, but I wish you guys dared to let the battle videos be longer and more detailed. This could easily have been 10 to 20 minutes longer just with the battle stuff alone. And Stefan's comment is not the only one we received. We got a number of other people who said that they wish we spent more time either in the war game or just in general. So what, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's an editing thing. It's just so much more work. I know that's been a big factor with doing the series is it's just so much work.
I think there's also the question of, how much do you really need to see? I mean, there are some wargaming videos out there on YouTube. I've certainly watched some, and they tend to be 45 minutes to an hour or more of somebody like with an overhead camera filming every single turn, and it's like, I don't need to see that. That's kind of boring.
Well, and I think we had that discussion we all talked about how most of us don't watch all of that.
Right.
Well, we're in for like 20 minutes, and then we're bored and... Yeah, or I'll skip to the conclusion.
Right.
I'll skip further.
I don't need every die roll.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, and that was what we talked about. How do we achieve a balance between something you're going to want to watch and something that becomes It's a very fine line between enjoyable and entertaining and then laborious.
Right, and I sort of felt like that line was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Keep it under 30 minutes. Don't go over 30 minutes. But of course, you know, there's going to be sort of hardcore wargaming fans out there that will watch as many hours of the footage as you want.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm a hardcore fan, so I somewhat get that. But we were trying with this series, I think, to appeal to a wider market of people. We were hoping to expand the tent a little bit here and bring the hobby to more people, and that means maybe a shorter game experience.
Although, it seems like we got enough of those comments that maybe we push it out another 10 minutes.
Right, or another few for sure. Most of our videos now have been falling in that sort of low 20s range, so you know, there's room. Yeah, there's room maybe to add another 5 minutes to the gameplay, and we appreciate these comments.
Or bonus content.
Or bonus content. But appreciate the comments from everybody on ways that we can improve the series. We're certainly listening to that. And so that's going to be it for Keith and I right now. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to grab 2 other members of the club and get them down here to continue with the Q&A session. So,
all right,
let's go get some scotch.
We need hip flasks.
Let's start off with a pretty big question here, as a lot of ground we could cover, from Itinerant Hobbyist on YouTube, who says, I would love to see a vid explaining the structure of the club. Dues, terrain, armies, usage, etc. Tackle that.
We'll go with what he asked about. I mean, first, dues. We don't have any dues. To the extent that we have this fabulous gaming space, that's thanks to Greg, who actually bought the building. And we, as a club, renovated the space ourselves, maintain it ourselves. And we all kind of chip in, obviously, for supplies and stuff like that. But there are no dues whatsoever.
Well, maybe we will do a separate video later. I know it would be fun to do one because we have some footage from years ago when we renovated this building. And that was a pretty fun, hectic week. All the guys chipped in. So we've got some footage of that. Maybe we'll put a video together because I think that would be a...
chock full of extremely poor workmanship.
Yeah, looks great on the camera. Don't come up close.
What end of the hammer do I use?
Some of the other stuff, terrain, armies, far too many to mention. Perhaps we'll throw in some video here of our storage area here in the basement of the club, which is just bins upon bins upon bins and on a bunch of shelves of armies and terrain, so that pretty much anything that we need on a night that we're going to be gaming, we can find it just by going downstairs. Armies, I wouldn't even begin to know where to start. I think everybody has a bunch of different armies at a bunch of different scales from a bunch of different periods.
Well, how did it start? Because back in the day, 10 plus years ago, there was pretty much only one thing, maybe 2, that we ever played at the club.
Yeah, so I'll put myself kind of in the center of that start. I had moved back from Florida, and it was 2001. I was gaming at a local comic book store, which primarily was Warhammer Fantasy Battle, a little bit less of 40K. And so I started talking to this guy that was hanging out about World War II, and that guy was Keith Stein. And so we started talking, and he and I started gaming World War II, and eventually that would lead to the development of Disposable Heroes and Coffin for Seven Brothers systems that Keith and I wrote together, which is still going on now as Disposable Heroes 2. At the same time, there was another guy hanging out, and I started talking Napoleonics with him. His name was Dave Bailey. Dave is not a regular member of the club most of the time, but he has helped out, most notably in 2015 when we were doing the 200th anniversary of the 1815 campaign. Dave was very pivotal in that because of big interest in Napoleonics. So basically, it's me, Keith Stein, and Dave Bailey, and we're playing World War II, and we're playing Napoleonics, and then we start grabbing people. There's this kid who comes in one night, and I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, and because how old were you, Greg?
I was 13. My parents boldly dropped me off at the comic book shop, and for the first night I just sat there and watched you guys play a Napoleonics game. Was the first night that I ever came in. So it was me and a bunch of 30 and 40-year-old dudes.
I wasn't 40 then.
So we got two related questions here, and I'm going to ask these to Steve because he does a lot of our map work. Hanger Flying on YouTube says, what do you use to make the map graphics with moving flags? And William on YouTube similarly asks, what do you guys use for making your map slides?
Okay. Well, Greg, you actually generally do the background maps.
I make the maps in Paint, which is, yes, incredibly low-tech, but I think they look pretty good for Paint. And then I pass them off to Steve for the animation.
Yeah, and that I just use Adobe Premiere, and I actually use Adobe Premiere Elements 15 is what I'm using right now as we tape this. So it's not even the high-end Adobe stuff. It's just managing to learn how to use keyframes and motion. I had initially thought I was going to use Blender, which is a 3D animation software out there, and I had done a previous animated map before we even started this. It turned out great, but it was absolutely horrific to try and do. And once I figured out how to do it within Adobe Premiere Elements, it became very easy.
Okay, so next we've got a couple terrain-related questions. One from Buddy MC on YouTube. He says, your terrain looks good. Well, thank you, Buddy. How about sharing some tips on making terrain for 6mm? And Lachlan emailed us to say, good day. My mates and I were wondering how you make the creek and stream like the one in the Antietam Wargame video. We play 15mm ACW if that's any help. Thanks, keep making your videos.
Well,
I'm just looking at you. I don't know why. It's like, it's your turn. Yeah.
You're the one who does almost all of the 6mm terrain.
Yeah, I actually have produced none of the rivers that they use. However, if you were to look, I think the main way that they made the rivers, and people have several different sets of these, is they are strips of felt cut to width and then smeared with a latex caulk. That's basically the method almost everybody uses.
That's the method. It's great for flexible rivers. They're cheap, and a lot of people over the years have asked about the rivers, and like Chow said, a lot of guys in the club have made their own sets. So we're going to do a 2-minute terrain video. It'll post later this week on Thursday, and that is a 2-minute video just on how to make the rivers.
And I'll interject something on that, is if these guys can do it, you can do it.
Thanks.
I don't know that I've ever been able to successfully do it. Although I will point out that it's not just useful for rivers. I mean, if you want a dirt road that you want to be flexible to go over hills or something, you can also smear out a brown caulk. So
I think we have a couple sets of roads that are like that too.
Yeah. As for the other terrain that we do in the club, I mean, pretty much everything we make is handcrafted, usually with paper or felt. I run a website, 6mmACW.com, where we have a whole page of terrain tips.
And we'll have more coming on this channel too. 2-minute terrain tips, sometimes longer terrain tips in the not too distant future.
Definitely. Okay, Matthew on YouTube asks, so how can we get a chance to be guest players? I live close to Leesburg.
Well,
that's not real close to us.
No, but people are willing to drive a long distance, and that's great, particularly if you get to rub elbows with major YouTube stars like us.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Really, reach out to us and say you're interested in stopping by. We do welcome visitors. We've already welcomed a few people. And we do tend to be a little picky about folks that we invite out on a regular basis. But if you're interested and you're in the area and you want to just stop by and game for an evening, reach out via the email or comments or something, and hopefully we can work something out.
Yep. Okay, so a couple of comments here from multiple people. Matthew, Kevin, Philip, there were more. Please fix your sound recording, especially in the game room. Somebody said audio could have been cleaner. The sound is a little ropey. Not sure what ropey sounds like.
It sounds like it's not a compliment.
Yeah,
well, that's the way I would go.
Yeah, right.
Perhaps it's a technical sound term. I don't know. But
I will point out something here right before these guys try to answer that, because these are the guys that are doing the filming. These are the guys that are responsible for putting the program together, and it's an awful lot of work. It's important to understand is that there is no budget. If anybody has any question about that, there is no influx of money from any source other than from our own pockets and our own time. That being the case, keep that in mind. If there's anything that you see that's like that,
I think that pretty much answers the question. I mean, we don't have professional sound equipment, and if you've seen the war room, we've got 15-foot high ceilings, so it's just a giant echo chamber in there.
And not only do we have no budget, we really have no expertise. I think all of us had done home videos before. I had done a little bit of like slideshow editing using Premiere for my daughter's sports teams. But that was about the extent of it. So when we jumped into this, it was kind of, well, this is how I think it should be done, and hopefully this works. That being said, I do have a new microphone.
Okay, so we're going to end with this question. This is from the Brick Kid on YouTube. He says, are kids allowed at Historicon? And I'm assuming the Brick Kid is probably a kid.
A kid. The answer is yes. Kids of all ages are welcome at Historicon. We're a bunch of kids, to be honest. But if you check out our video with Scott Landis, the interview that I did with him at this past Historicon, this past summer, that's a huge part of what HMGS and the folks who run those cons are looking to do. The bottom line is we've got to show the younger generations, whether it's young adults or kids, that this is fun. And yes, you learn while you're doing it, and it's educational. I love that aspect of it. But you're also pushing around toy soldiers, rolling dice, having great moments, creating stories on the tabletop, tabletops that can look absolutely stunning visually. It's art, it's history, it's gaming, it's the social stuff that goes along. It's a great activity, and I think all the conventions, and certainly the big HMGS conventions, offer that for pretty much anyone of any age.
Well, this is a good question to end on, because I think it cuts to maybe why we decided to do this video series at all. I mean, we've been gaming together, like Chow said, for coming up on 20 years, but we just decided that we were going to start doing this, and I think to some degree it's because we'd like to see more exposure for the hobby.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot out there right now, and when I talk to friends and family who I know well, I would never tell a stranger that I do this, of course, that I do historical miniature wargaming. The answer that I normally get back, the response is, hey, that's really interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Right, exactly.
People have no idea what the heck this is. They don't even know it exists, and I actually think if people just knew about it, that more people would be interested in this.
Yeah, and it's a relatively clean hobby. I think of a lot of guys my age, I'm currently 47, I think of guys' hobbies, some of this, involve drinking, gambling.
Well, this involves drinking.
Well, yeah, I guess
this involves as much drinking as it does.
T-shirt.
The T-shirt says Scotch on the back. Yeah.
I always forget that.
And actually, I see on the monitor over here, we did just get another email question, which we can get in here at the end. It looks like a two-part question for you, Greg.
Yes.
And it's from a Nikki W.
Mm-hmm.
And Nikki, I'm assuming it's a she, asks, Greg, why you, and that's with the letters Y and U, so sexy? And the second part is, are you, again, just the letters, married?
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to get any more uncomfortable than sitting between the two of you on this tiny 4-foot couch.
I'm glad this was directed at you.
Yeah, so that's,
do tell.
That's awesome. Why you so sexy? That's a great question. Must have to do with the great Notre Dame hat. Crushed Michigan last night for all you Notre Dame fans out there. Go Irish. And are you married? Unfortunately, Nikki, yes. This miniature wargamer is off the market. Thanks for submitting questions. If we get some more, then maybe at the end of the season, when we finish the next 5 episodes, we'll sit down. Maybe 3 other guys here will do another Q&A for you, and we can get back to the rest of your questions.